This morning, Engage Cuba released a set of 6-state agricultural outlook reports. The new data shows that the U.S. has fallen to the #5 supplier position to Cuba, slipping behind Vietnam since last year. Joining us from the RFD-TV Washington, D.C. News Bureau is Engage Cuba's Senior Policy Advisor, Leanne Evans. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mrs. Evans. And what are some of the contributing factors explaining why U.S. supplies to Cuba have fallen to the #5 spot, slipping behind Vietnam?
Absolutely. So when you look at the U.S. exports to Cuba, what we've seen is basically since 2006, since 2009, there's been a precipitous drop in U.S. agricultural exports to Cuba. The reasons for this are there's more competition coming from other countries like the EU, from South America. You have Brazil and Argentina, who have increasing exports to Cuba, and they're able to offer financing, which we are not able to do because of our U.S. policies. And there had been this increasing trend from these other countries, and what we've seen now for the first time, based on data coming from the end of 2015, is that Vietnam has overtaken to become the #4 supplier. This is largely because of the rice that they're exporting to Cuba, but the U.S. used to be consistently a top, #1 or #2 supplier to Cuba, and we're losing out on all of this market share in what is almost a $2 billion market of agricultural imports.
Can you describe some of the major Cuban imports that the U.S. exports to the island nation?
So what Cuba imports, typically the product mix, as of the latest data, it's about 14% rice, and then down from there you've got about 13% poultry and poultry products, and then dairy products, corn, soybean, feed and fodder, and then some other products. And then what the U.S. is exporting to Cuba right now typically is almost entirely poultry, soybean meal, and corn. So there is a broader product mix of what Cuba is importing, but we're not exporting that same variety. So we're sort of pigeonholed into these, into poultry, soybean meal, and corn. What we would like to see is for there to be a change in U.S. policy to allow for offering credit and extending credit for Cuban agricultural importers, which hopefully would allow for greater exports of U.S. rice, which has a huge opportunity in Cuba, as well as other products that we should and could be exporting to Cuba.
Now, you talk about changing policy. We know that agribusiness is supportive of changing U.S. policy, but who is maybe against it?
So you're absolutely right that agribusiness is supportive of this policy, and we at Engage Cuba believe that we should change the policies and allow for agricultural exports to Cuba in addition to allowing for travel to Cuba and getting rid of the embargo entirely. There is still some opposition from, frankly, some groups that are not supportive of engaging with Cuba for more political reasons, but from an agribusiness standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from many other viewpoints, quite frankly, we believe that this policy should change, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot from an agricultural export standpoint where, commodity prices are down, we're looking for other markets, and we are shutting ourselves out of a market that's only 90 miles off of our shore, and where we used to be a #1 supplier, and we should be again.
Thank you so much for joining us. Engage Cuba's Senior Policy Advisor, Leanne Evans. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, stay with us. We have much more to come as your Market Day report continues this Wednesday morning, including we're going to check those markets one more time and the weather with Joe King right here on RFD-TV.